Hi everybody, welcome to my channel, Life, Law, Bin. Now, hopefully, most of our viewers would have advanced to the interview stage. How do you think they should go about preparing for specifically common law sets interview process?
Okay, well, preparing for interview, it can be daunting, especially common law interviews, because there's three vast different areas of law that you could get asked questions about. So, first piece of advice would be don't go crazy overloading yourself with information. I'd say big key legal cases or legal updates, they're important to know, read about them, do it gradually in the weeks and days leading up to interviews. But if you go into too much depth with your legal research, you really are at serious risk of confusing yourself. And I don't think that's beneficial. So little and often read about things, look out for the big cases, the big updates. And I'd also say if you're asked a question about a particular legal case, in the written application, then when it comes to interview, make sure you know that case inside out, including the dissenting arguments, and form an opinion on it, because you may very likely get asked questions on it. And then in terms of coming out of the research side of things, I found it really useful to practice discussing non-legal topics, because I found that a lot of common law pupillage interviews involved giving you a totally random topic that you had to argue for or against. So what I did was I got my boyfriend, who has a non-legal background. He's completely scientific, and I'd sit him down and make him give me a topic, which I then set a timer, 10 minutes. I'd then prepare an argument for or against it, and I'd present that to him for 10, 15 minutes. He would intervene or at the end ask me questions. He'd play the devil's advocate, basically, which obviously is there to replicate what will happen in an interview, and replicate judicial intervention, which obviously barristers have to be able to deal with. But whilst preparing those arguments, I'd put down my point, and I'd think at that moment in time, what is the counter argument to that going to be? If you think whilst you're preparing, you're already ahead of the game when it comes to interventions in interviews. So a barrister in the interview can ask you a question and you'll think, yeah, I've got that one. I prepared for that. It's never going into the interview, it's never as easy as just practicing on your own or with someone you're comfortable with, but it will place you in good stead if you've just been practicing random topics for a few days before. You're in the swing of being able to prepare under a time pressure, and yeah, it really helped me. So I think that's really useful. I'd also say that um, knowing why you want to practice in a certain location is important. I think chambers are becoming a lot more savvy and alive to the fact that a lot of pupillage applicants would quite literally accept pupillage on the moon. And you need to be prepared to answer in detail why you want to work on a particular circuit or in a particular location. They're not just going to accept, I think it's a nice place and I want to live there. They'll go to delve a bit further into that, and they're going to ask how long you plan on being there, and what your ties to the area are. So I think that's something worth thinking about as well.
Interesting, because I know that some people don't really have to worry about that with London sets, but I think you really need to be cognizant of it when thinking about applying for pupillage on circuit. People want to know that you're really interested in the area and want to stay, especially if you kind of have a long background or history of living somewhere else, I really think you
Mm.
really need to think about justifying why you want to move. Now, what was your experience like in your first round of interviews?
I think first rounds are scary. In many ways, almost a bit scarier than second round interviews because, especially if it's the first one of the first round of interviews, it's daunting. And you also haven't really got a feel for that chambers and their way of interviewing and questioning yet. So it can be quite scary. So you need to be able to stay calm. No, all of mine actually, sorry, were online. I think it's probably going to stay that way for most chambers, that first round interviews will be online. A piece of advice I'd give with regards to that is try, if you can, to not have notes up on your computer screen. It's really tempting, but you wouldn't go into an interview in person with a book of notes and sit there reading from them, would you? You just wouldn't. So try and treat it as a normal interview because otherwise it's just going to sound a little bit too rehearsed, I think. So that's what I tried to do, and I think it made me come across more natural, I think. Um, so yeah, if you can do that, that's good. And then the tasks I got given in my first round interview were pretty much just like the ones I just touched on. They were topical debate questions that got sent 5 to 10 minutes before the interview. You had to prepare them and then argue a proposition. It's probably worth mentioning I had one interview where the task wasn't sent to me beforehand, but halfway through the interview, they just stopped and they said, right, turn your camera off and you've got 10 minutes to prepare this argument. And they were still on the screen. So I found that quite, I wasn't ready for that. I was a bit thrown off by it. But stay calm in that situation and also don't think it's a time test. If they've said 10 minutes, you're allowed to use that full 10 minutes, even if they're sat there waiting on the camera. You're entitled to that time and they're not trying to trick you or catch you out. So that's really important to remember. And yeah, first round interviews, once they're out of the way, they're okay. You've just got to crack on and start thinking about second rounds, hopefully, if you get to that stage.
And how did you find your second round interviews? Did you think they were much different to the first?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I had my second round interview with Day Street in person. So I was quite lucky because I think it's easier to come across well in person, and that was an advantage for me. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case for everyone. So don't expect any one format of interview. Be prepared for both, I'd say. If it is an in-person interview, arrive early. I think I got a train about 4 hours earlier than I needed to for my Day Street second round. I was sat in a cafe around the corner like a fool, but it's better to be better to be early and know that you're there and ready than to be flustered and panicked or in a rush. And then in terms of the actual interview, I think be prepared for the number of people interviewing you to increase. So from first round, I generally found it was 2 to 3 people. And then in second round, it was about 5 or 6 people. So you need to expect that to happen and not completely panic when you walk into a room and there's more people than the first round. And in terms of the tasks you'll get given for a second round common law pupillage interview, they are more complex than the first round, obviously, but they're usually sent about 2 or 3 days before the interview is going to take place. So for Day Street, I had to cross examine a witness in a criminal case. I got given 3 witnesses to prepare for. I'd say if you ever get a task like that, don't hedge your bets on it being one witness, especially because you think, oh, their witness statement's a bit longer, it's likely going to be them. Don't hedge your bets. You don't know what they're going to ask you to do. And yeah, prepare to be doing advocacy in front of a panel of 5 to 6 barristers. It's nerve-wracking, but they've seen it all before and they just want to know what you're capable of, really.
I like the fact that you identified that that's a style of questioning that people can expect in terms of the advocacy. Do you think that there are any other kind of questions that persons can expect in both wrongs? Because I know sometimes after performing some advocacy, some sets may still ask you questions. So, do you find that you found a specific kind of questions in both wrongs?
I think in both rounds, you're always going to get asked the obvious questions, which are why do you want to be a barrister? Why this chambers? Why this area of law? And you should be fully prepared with answers for those that you know like the back of your hand with examples ready to back them up. That's a given, that's obvious. There's then the less obvious questions that can crop up. I found them to crop up a lot in first round interviews where, for example, in one, I was asked if you were a character from a book, which character would you be? And I hadn't prepared an answer to that because you can't simply anticipate every possible question that you could be asked. So in that situation, you've got to take a few moments. It'll feel long to you, but it won't be in reality. It will literally just be a few moments. And just answer it honestly with the best answer you think you can give and not the answer you think they want you to give. That's important. But also just be prepared for the unexpected. I also had an interview where we spent the large majority of the interview having a conversational discussion about my undergraduate dissertation. Now, obviously, I wrote that dissertation, I knew a lot about it, so it wasn't the end of the world, but the formats and the types of questions you can get in these interviews, it really does vary. So that was a big lesson to me to not go in just always expecting the traditional format because it can throw you a little bit. I also had the experience of being asked to perform tasks again. So I had performed an advocacy task and they asked me what I think I could have done better. Now it's easy to panic in that situation and think, oh, I've done a terrible job. They must have thought it was so rubbish if they're asking me that. They're not, they're testing your self-reflection and self-awareness. So all you have to do is identify something you could have done better and then be prepared for them to ask you to do it again. So in my day street interview, I did my advocacy task twice. And at the end, I thought, oh, is that a bad sign? But I thought the strong likelihood is they're asking everyone what they could have done better, and they're asking everyone to do it twice. So don't think it's because you've done a bad job. They want to see that you're reflecting on your own work, which is an important skill of being a barrister. You'll also get ethical dilemmas. Know the core duties of being a barrister if you don't already. They're on the BSB website. Be prepared for the interviewer to be devil's advocate with that. If you give an answer and you're pretty certain that it's right, don't change your answer because they're pushing you. For example, if you get asked what you would do if you got given a brief to appear in court in 1 hour's time and you aren't very experienced in that area of law, well, what I would say is I would explain to the clerks and would explain to the judge that owing to my interest for my clients, my duty of care to my client, I can't appear in court. And you might get asked, well, what if the judge gets really angry with you? What if he demands that you have to come in? You have to hold your ground. You can't change your answer then because you've got someone playing devil's advocate with you. So don't do that. And then I'd say, lastly, you might get asked questions that you don't know the answer to. And in that situation, say that you don't know the answer. Don't make things up. So, for example, in an interview, I got given a booklet of information about the Contempt of Court Act, and I was asked to read it. Now, I went into the interview and I was able to answer some questions about it, but there were some that I didn't know because I hadn't absorbed all the 200 pages in about 20 minutes. So, in that situation, the best thing you can do is say, well, I don't know actually, but if you give me a few moments, I'll go back and I'll find that information for you. Because obviously, as well, that replicates what would happen as a barrister. A judge at times is going to ask you questions you don't know the answer to, and you're going to have to take a few moments to say, can I just have a moment, Your Honour, to look through my papers? And I think they'll respect your honesty rather than sitting there trying to make things up.
Yeah, those are some excellent points. I think sometimes we get caught up with what we expect, so our expectations of how an interview should go, and then we're really, really badly thrown. And it has nothing to do with your talent or the possibility that you might have been a good advocate or that you're suitable for pupillage. It's just that, your expectations kind of got ahead of you and you weren't able to make the best of the current situation. Now, Grace, you've given us some excellent information, but before we conclude, do you have any top tips for that interview stage?
Yes. I'm going to do top three tips again, but they're going to be a little bit different because I feel like already in this video, I've mentioned a lot of practical and conventional things. So, my number one top tip, and it's a little bit cringy. I think some people laugh at me when I tell them that I do this, but it's to visualize success. Visualize going into an interview and it going really well. Visualize pupillage offer day and being offered a pupillage. Visualize your life practicing as a barrister. And a lot of what visualizing is it's imagining the emotion with the outcome. So you can relax into the knowledge that you are more than capable of doing this and you are good enough. And I think I found that helped me a lot with imposter syndrome. I think during pupillage applications, I got that so badly where I'd question how I'd even got an interview and whether I'm a worthy candidate compared to all the others. And the visualization process and having a sense of positivity going into it, it really helped to calm me down. So that's a top tip I'd share. It might not work for everyone, and I understand that, but it did work for me, and I'm sure it would for others. My second tip would then be, and I feel like I've probably this has been echoed throughout a lot of what I've said today, is to be yourself. I think we all, when we imagine barristers, have a stereotypical barrister that comes to mind. And I won't go too much into that, but I think you have to avoid adopting a persona that you think people or an interview panel would expect of you. I mean, I was once told by a legal professional that it would be unlikely I'd ever make it as a barrister because I have a Yorkshire accent, which I now know is completely untrue because there's a wide range of wonderful and diverse accents in advocates at the bar. But at the time, I really let that knock my self-confidence. Now, if you try to adopt the style of another, you're not going to come across as yourself. And all a pupillage panel wants to do is see who you are and what you're about. They want to see that they'll get on with you as a colleague and a person and that you're a good match for chambers. So just be polite, be friendly, and be yourself. And then coming on to the third top tip, it would be to explain the process of applying for pupillage and pupillage interviews. Explain it to someone who's not going through it. So I don't know if you've found this experience, Nia, but it can be very hard for people who aren't either barristers or aspiring barristers to understand just how intense the process is of trying to obtain a pupillage. It's, it's not just a normal job interview. The statistics, when you look at them for obtaining pupillage, are shocking. And it's a really, really intense process. So you need the support of someone who isn't going through that stress themselves, but who you can also explain it to so that they understand the real struggle. So I'd say take the time to sit someone down, explain the process fully and in depth to them, making them aware of the statistics and realistically how long it can take to get pupillage for some people. And then hopefully you've got someone there for you, maybe when one interview doesn't go as well as you liked, who you can go to and talk about, and they can help you bounce back from that. And that's going to benefit your mental health, and you're going to have someone neutral to talk to about it. So I think that's really important. Don't just surround yourself with barristers and aspiring barristers in the process. Also have someone who is neutral in it all.
I think that's really some interesting food for thought because most of the time, if you're speaking to your family members or friends that aren't in the law, many people, first of all, don't even know what pupillage is. Pupil, what? What's that? What's a
Yeah.
pupillage? And I literally just say fancy word for work experience. That's really what it is. But I'm
Yeah.
saying that to say many people don't know how grueling it is. So I'm really happy that you spent some time to emphasize uh, the importance of speaking about the process, how incredibly difficult it is to even attain a pupillage, so that you do have that pillar of support because it's very easy to crumble in this process. Many times you're writing, even writing your applications, you're debating with yourself, should I even send this in? There are going to be so many people who are way better than I am. Why should I even bother my head with it? So I think from a well-being perspective, that's a really, really good observation. And I think it's a really interesting tip, and people should definitely apply it. But Grace, that's a wrap for today. You were an excellent guest, and I am happy to conclude my pupillage workshop series with you. So thank you. I know my viewers would be grateful. So thanks for joining us, Grace.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Nia.
No worries. For everyone else, we'll see you on the next video. Have a good one, guys. Take care of yourselves and all the best with your applications. Bye, everyone.
Bye.